Hey solo gamers, thanks for checking out How's It Play Solo. I'm Mack Kern, and today I'm taking a look at Mr. Cabbagehead's garden game, which is a solitaire card game where you're trying to plant a garden without the interference of your pesky neighbors. The game is currently available as a print and play game, which is how I've put my copy together, but if you'd like to buy a professionally printed version, you can do so from the designer's Printer Studio site. It's also been announced that the game has been picked up by a publisher, so it will be available as a retail release at a later date. Let's check it out. When you set up Mr. Cabbagehead's garden game, you have 4 cards for your 4 different neighbors. You also have a beehive that has 3 bee tokens on it. You've got an additional 3 bee tokens that are set to the side. You've got a card for Eudora Brassica, who is the president of the garden club. And then you have a pile of face-down neighbor tokens. You also are going to have a deck of 45 vegetable cards. And you're going to sort this deck, you'll shuffle it up and sort it into 3 piles of 15 cards apiece. And on the bottom of each of those 3 piles, you're going to place one of these on holiday cards, and then you stack those 3 piles on top of each other to form your vegetable deck. On a typical turn in Mr. Cabbagehead's garden game, you reveal the top 3 cards of the vegetable deck and you place them from left to right. There's a couple different numbers on each of these vegetable cards. This blue number indicates how many points the vegetable is worth if you can score it, and I'll talk more about scoring in a moment. The red number tells you how many of that specific vegetable card is in the deck. And then the black number is the neighbor number. The white number is the tedious number. Those will come into play later. So when you have these 3 vegetable cards laid out, you're choosing one of them to place in your garden plot. Now if you take the card on the left, you have to place one of the bee tokens from the supply on top of the beehive. If there are no bee tokens left in the supply, you're not able to take this card. The card on the right works the same way, but the opposite. You have to take a card off of the beehive to place this card in your plot. And again, if there's no bees on the beehive, you're not able to use this card. The card in the middle, you can place in your plot for free without either spending or gaining a bee. Your garden plot is constrained to a 6x3 area, but the boundaries aren't set in stone until you have either 6 columns, 3 rows, or both. So if this lettuce card is the first card that I add to my garden plot, when I place a subsequent card, I can place it anywhere as long as I'm not breaking the idea of a 6x3 grid. So I could put it directly next to this card, or maybe I could leave a card's width and place it here. I could even say that this is going to be part of column 1 and this is going to be part of column 6, and add cards here later, and then I can add up to 2 rows below, or maybe I want to add 1 row above and 1 row below. You have a lot of flexibility there. At the end of the game, you score points for vegetables of the same type that are orthogonally adjacent. So if I had these 2 lettuce cards placed together, I would get 4 points for each of them. If I added another lettuce card that was orthogonally adjacent to one of these cards, I would get to add another 4 points to my score. You also get points for certain patterns at the end of the game, and I'll talk more about that when I reach the end game scoring. When you're planting a new card in your garden plot, you are allowed to get rid of a card that had previously been planted and plant a new card in its spot. If you do that, you take the old card and you tuck it underneath of the Eudora Brassica card until the end of the game. After you've decided which card of the 3 revealed you'd like to plant, you look at the other 2 cards and you compare the neighbor number. And whichever card has the higher neighbor number is the card that you use to determine how many neighbor tokens you draw. So this card has a neighbor number of 43, and it tells me to draw 3 neighbor tokens. So I'm going to turn those tokens face up and place them onto the corresponding neighbor cards. After you've placed your neighbor tokens, you discard the 2 cards that you didn't plant in your garden plot, and then you continue the process of drawing 3 cards, planting one of them, and then placing neighbor tokens. You continue with that process until you reveal the first on holiday card, and at that point you see which neighbor card has the most tokens on it, and that neighbor steals 1 vegetable from your garden. Now if there's a tie between 1 or more neighbors, neither or none of them will take a vegetable. But if one neighbor has more tokens than any of the others, that neighbor will take a vegetable according to the rules for that specific neighbor. So if the mayor of Onion Town has the most tokens, he's going to take the turnip, salsify, or radish card in your garden plot with the highest neighbor number. And you just simply discard that card from your plot, and then you take all of the tokens off of these cards, and you continue to take normal turns until you reveal the next on holiday card. After you've gone through the entire deck and had 3 opportunities for your neighbors to steal from your garden, you perform final scoring. And as I stated earlier, you score points for each vegetable that's orthogonally adjacent to at least one other vegetable of the same type. So because these pumpkins are all orthogonally adjacent, I would get the full point value for each of them, which for pumpkins is 6 points. I would also get points for these turnips, for the rutabagas, for the carrots, and for the beans. And I mentioned earlier that you also can get points according to meeting certain patterns. So if I have 2 different columns of triplets on the outside of my plot, that would be worth 18 points. There's a couple different awards that you can get for the patterns you place in your garden. You also get points for having all 9 types of vegetables. If all 6 bees are in the supply, you get some points. And then you lose 2 points for every vegetable that you discarded and placed under the Eudora Brassica card over the course of the game. Once you've tallied up your score, you can compare it to the rubric in the rules to get an idea of how well you've played. I've been very happy with my plays of Mr. Cabbagehead's garden game so far, and even when there are so many quick solo card games on the market, I think this one still definitely has a place in my collection. I really appreciate how I can play through an entire game in about 15 or 20 minutes, and if I had to use one word to describe the game, I think I would choose relaxing. There is a little bit of tension in knowing that your neighbors can swoop in and maybe take a key card from your garden, but overall it's pretty stress-free. You have a lot of control over what your garden looks like at the end of the game, and I just find it a really pleasant way to spend 15 or 20 minutes at the end of the day. If I have one complaint about the game, it's that I think that the rules could be worded a little bit more clearly regarding the bonuses you get for having certain patterns in your garden at the end of the game. It's not too confusing, but some of them are a little bit ambiguous, and in such a simple game, it's just kind of a pain to have any sort of rules ambiguities at all. I will say that the designer is very responsive on the Board Game Geek forums. He's always quick to answer any questions posed about the game, and I do think that those rules will probably be a lot cleaner in the official retail release of this game. But even as it is right now, I definitely recommend checking this out. Mr. Cabbagehead's Garden Game is a great solo card game that you owe it to yourself to try. Check it out.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.